Qué gusto tener la última plática de la temporada con Rav Joey. Tuvimos con él algunas pláticas, tuvimos un seminario con él y de verdad es alguien que tiene un conocimiento increíble de varias enseñanzas. Espero que lo aprovechen, que disfruten. Gracias a Chava, Isaac, por otra vez organizar este tipo de pláticas. Y esperen el calendario de LUL. Tenemos grandes sorpresas, grandes oradores que vamos a tener durante todo el mes de LUL. Pero aprovechar hoy en la noche a Rav Joey. Thank you, Rav Joey, for giving us of your time. We know you just had a little baby girl, so we know you're tired, and even that you're here with us to spread us words of wisdom. And I think we spoke that you're gonna give like a speech about in 50 minutes, an hour, and then if people have questions, so they could write it in the chat or they could write it in Spanish, and I will translate it to you in English.
Okay.
So again, thank you so much for your time, your effort, and hopefully we're gonna have an hour of inspiration and words of wisdom. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me again. It's a good sign if you're interested in still hearing from me after 3 days. So that's a positive thing. So the title of tonight's Shir, Be'ezrat Hashem, is going to be, What is Kabbalah? Now, I have to first and foremost say that it's impossible to share anything about what Kabbalah is in an hour or under. It would take a long time to really share properly what exactly we mean when we talk about Kabbalah. But what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and give a brief overview or an introduction that covers both the historical picture of what Kabbalah is, based on the history and its development. Then I am going to introduce some of the personalities, some of the tzaddikim, who bring the teachings of Kabbalah down to us in a way that we can live with, even if we are not interested in studying the deeper ideas. And finally, the most important part is going to be what it means for us. So we'll start off with the question of what is Kabbalah. Now, the way that our holy books describe it is that at the moment of Matan Torah, the story that we know is that Moshe Rabbeinu was Allah El Hashemayim, and he brought down the Aseres HaDibros. And those Aseres HaDibros eventually become Torah Shebichtav. And Torah Shebichtav eventually gives birth to Torah Sheba'al Peh. And Torah Sheba'al Peh is the Mishnah and the commentary on the Mishnah, which is the Gemara, and then the Gaonim and the Rishonim and the Achronim. And Chazal tell us that every word of Torah that will be spoken throughout history by us, even by us, was included in the Torah that was given over to Moshe Rabbeinu from HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Har Sinai. That's the revealed aspect of the Torah that has been given over. But within that Torah that was given over to Moshe Rabbeinu, there was also a second side of the Torah, a more hidden side. And that is Pnimiyas HaTorah, or the inner world of Torah, or in other words, Kabbalah. So what is first and foremost fundamental to understand is that everything we know of Kabbalah comes to us from Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not some late creation, chas v'shalom, but rather it has always been there along with the Torah. Now, the first time that we begin to see the existence of Pnimiyas HaTorah is already by the Nevi'im, in particular by the story of Yechezkel as Yecheskel stood on the riverbanks of Nahar Kvar in Galus, as the Jewish people were in exile, he experienced one of the greatest revelations in the history of Jewish revelation, which was Ma'aseh HaMerkava, the tale of the chariot. Now, what a Merkava means is it's a wagon, it's like a vehicle. A vehicle is something that carries one person from one place to another place. The idea of Ma'aseh HaMerkava was Yecheskel, the Navi, seeing what it was like or how, on a certain level, HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself in the world. Chazal, the Gemara in Maseches Chagiga, begin discussing what it means to talk about Ma'aseh Merkava, what it means to begin to think about the ideas that Yecheskel Hanavi saw. And there are different rules and there are different laws about who is allowed to speak when and how many people are allowed to learn it. But what we see already in the Gemara is that when it comes to the revealed aspect of the Torah, Torah Sheba'al Peh, the halachos and the Gemara that we understand, there's a mitzvah to reveal it, to make it very clear. But when it comes to Torah Tanistar, the hidden Torah, the concealed Torah, or the Torah of Kabbalah, it's the opposite. We're not meant to talk about it out loud. We are meant to hide it. It's meant to be hidden. And we're going to see a few reasons why our tzaddikim felt that Kabbalah or Pnimiyus HaTorah, the inner teachings of Torah, needed to be hidden. Within the Gemara itself, there are two tzaddikim, two Tanaim, who begin to play a very major role in the revelation or the Gilui of Kabbalah. First, there was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, Zchus Yagen Aleinu, were told that in the Maseches Chagiga, he was Oile Lepardes. He went up to that holy orchard, that place where through meditation, or through the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or through tefillah, or different concentrations, he was able to go up to a place in Shemayim, or in his own mind, where he was able to see how HaKadosh Baruch Hu was running the world, how Hashem was running the world. And in that story, there were four people who went up. It was Rabbi Akiva, it was Ben Azai, it was Ben Zoma, and it was Elisha ben Avuha, who's also known as Acher. And the Gemara tells us that Acher became a kofar. When Acher saw the secrets of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the secrets of the world, Acher misunderstood and he denied the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He said that there's two things in the world, there's good and evil in the world, and not chas v'shalom, only HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ben Azai died. Ben Azai was so overwhelmed by what he saw, so in love with what he saw, that he couldn't come back down. Ben Zoma lost his mind. Ben Zoma wasn't able to function properly anymore. But it was only Rabbi Akiva who was nichnas b'shalom, who entered in peace, v'yoytze b'shalom, and he left in peace as well. This is the Rabbi Akiva who we know loses his 24,000 Talmidim, shelo nahogu kavod ze lezeh, and after those Talmidim die, Rabbi Akiva develops 5 other Talmidim. And one of those Talmidim is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rashbi. Now, already by Rabbi Akiva, we see how he understands the inner world of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Not only the outside of the halachot and what the outside world looks like, but Rabbi Akiva was always able to look on the inside. He was able to see what was invisible. He was able to look deeper than the surface. He was able, in other words, to look into the pnimius, into the inner sense of things. We're entering into the Shalosh Shavuot now, Bein HaMitzarim, the time where we mourn collectively over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, which should be built speedily in our days. And it's Rabbi Akiva who, when all of the other Tanaim are crying, when they see the ruins of the Beis HaMikdash, Rabbi Akiva is laughing. When all of the other Tanaim see death in the world, Rabbi Akiva sees light. And even at the moment of Rabbi Akiva's death, what he's able to say is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Rabbi Akiva's whole life was a life of looking into the inside, being able to see that externally things look a certain way, but internally, b'pnimius hadvarim, the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ever present. Rabbi Akiva taught this idea to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, to Rashbi. Rashbi begins to be chaste, and because he's chaste, he's forced to enter into the Ma'ara, into that cave, where for 13 years, Chazal tell us, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Lazar, sit and learn Torah with Eliyahu Hanavi. And what we get after he leaves that cave are the teachings of the Zohar HaKadosh, the Holy Zohar. Now, we're not going to discuss tonight the different opinions, both b'kedusha and not in kedusha, of where the book of the Zohar comes from, or what the book of the Zohar is. All of our tzaddikim, in different ways sometimes, announce that the book of the Zohar are the teachings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now this takes place in the 2nd century. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, after coming out of the cave, he surrounds around himself about 10 Talmidim, referred to in the Zohar HaKadosh as the Chavraya Kadisha, the holy group of tzaddikim, who along with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai wander around the mountains in northern Israel at night, revealing the secrets of Torah. But we don't find this book in the 2nd century. The first mention that we have of the book of the Zohar, which is basically a commentary on the Torah based on the inner teachings, is in the year 1250. The book of the Zohar arrives, and the world, the Jewish world, is lit aflame. The hearts and the minds of the Jewish people were captured, because what they found in the book of the Zohar was not the teachings of the Gemara. It wasn't those external halachot and rules and regulations. The book of the Zohar spoke of yearning. The book of the Zohar spoke of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the concept of the spheros of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu moves out of infinity into what we know of as creation, secrets of the angels and secrets of the different worlds. And the Jewish people were taken and they fell in love with the Zohar HaKadosh. But the Zohar HaKadosh remained on a certain level a closed book. Because when a person learns the Zohar in the Aramaic, it's an incredibly beautiful sefer. It's a very powerful sefer. It's a sefer that can inflame the heart and the mind. But sometimes it's very difficult to understand what the Sefer HaZohar is coming to teach us. It's very difficult for a person to understand exactly what the Zohar wants. The Zohar, which is revealed in the 13th century, stays as a closed book where many people didn't understand it until the 16th century, where we meet another tzaddik. This tzaddik's name was Rav Moshe Cordovaro, known as the Ramak. Now the Ramak lived in Sfat, in Safed, in the holy city of Ruach, the holy city of holy air. where that sense of blueness, where it feels like it's always time to daven mincha. In that place of Sfat, the Ramak begins to write a commentary on the Zohar HaKadosh called Or Yakar. And what the Ramak also did, what Rav Moshe Cordovaro also did, was he collected all of the different teachings of Kabbalah, all of the different teachings from the Rishonim and from the Geonim, and all of the different commentaries on the Sefer HaYetzirah, the Book of Creation, and on the Zohar, and on the different parts of the Zohar, the Idra Rabbah and the Idra Zuta. And he begins taking all of these opinions and compiling them, collecting them into one place. That place that the Ramak collected all of these ideas from is a book that he wrote called Pardes Rimonim. Pardes Rimonim is the orchard of pomegranates. And when a person looks at the Sefer Pardes Rimonim, what they find is almost a Shita Mekubetzet, a book that collects all different types of opinions, expresses 10 different opinions about one thing, and then the Ramak says that this is the way that I understand it. Now, the Ramak had a number of Talmidim, and he wrote a number of very powerful Svarim. One of the most powerful ones was Tomer Devora, the palm tree of Devora, where the Ramak goes through the 13 Midos HaRachamim, the highest level of trying to understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he teaches us how to live those Midos, how to actually try and experience those things in our own life. The Ramak had a number of very important Talmidim. One of those Talmidim was Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, who wrote the Pizmon L'Chadodi L'Kras Kala, Penei Shabbos na Kabbalah, that we sing on Friday night, who was a big Mekubal. He also had a Talmud, Rav Eliyahu Devidas, who wrote the Sefer Reshit Chochmah, which is also one of the most important Svarim written in Kabbalah. And then there was another tzaddik who arrived on the scene. Now this tzaddik comes from Mitzrayim, of all places. This tzaddik went by the name of Rav Yitzchak Luria, known as the Ari HaChai, or the Arizal. The Ari is Rosh Tevot. It's an acronym for Ha'eloki Rabbi Yitzchak, the godly Rabbi Yitzchak. Now, the Arizal was first a Talmud of the Shita Mekubetzet on the Gemara, Rav Betzalel Ashkenazi, and the Arizal even wrote part of the Shita Mekubetzet on Mesechet Chulin. And the Arizal, when studying by Rav Betzalel Ashkenazi, decided that he was going to try and be mitboded, to try and spend time alone studying the Zohar. And on the banks of the Nile River, the Arizal was zoiche to a Giloi Eliyahu, revelations of teachings from Eliyahu. And after receiving those teachings in the 16th century, the Arizal travels from Egypt to Sfat. And at that time, the Ramak was still the big tzaddik in Sfat who was teaching Kabbalah. When the Arizal comes, he begins to sit by the Ramak, very often calling the Ramak his Rebbe, quoting from the Ramak very often. But the Ramak dies shortly after the Arizal comes to Sfat. And that's when the Arizal starts offering his teachings. The Arizal lived a very short life. The Arizal lived to the age of 39 before being niptar. But in the 2.5 to 3 years that the Arizal spent teaching his ideas that he had learned from Eliyahu Hanavi in Mitzrayim, becomes what we know of as Kabbalah ta Arizal. The Arizal had one major Talmud. He had a number of major Talmidim, but for our understanding of just the history of this, his major Talmud was Rav Chaim Vital. Rav Chaim Vital came and sat by the feet of the Arizal, writing down every single word that he heard from his Rebbe in those 2.5 years. There were other tzaddikim who tried to become Talmidim of the Arizal. Famously, Rav Yosef Cairo, the Mechaber, the Baal HaShulchan Aruch, who was living at that time in Safat, who we know had an angel who came to teach him secrets, a Magid. Those teachings are recorded in the Sefer Magid Me'esharim. And Rav Yosef Cairo would come to sit by the feet of the Arizal. And every time he would sit by the Arizal, Rav Yosef Cairo would fall asleep against his will. And he would try and come again, and he would fall asleep. Until the Arizal said to him, "It's clear that Hashem doesn't want you learning from me." And Rav Yosef Cairo stopped trying to learn from the Arizal. Rav Chaim Vital begins writing down the teachings, and the Arizal gives Rav Chaim Vital permission to continue sharing those teachings. The Arizal is niptar, and eventually 20, 30 years it takes for the writings of Rav Chaim Vital to come out, which are referred to as the Kitvei HaArizal. Eitz Chaim, a commentary on the Torah, a commentary on the mitzvot, Shar HaKavanot, Pri Eitz Chaim, on Tefillah, Shar HaGilgulim, teachings about reincarnation of the soul, Shar HaHakdamot, Shar Ruach HaKodesh, different ways that a person can try and activate meditation and mindfulness. And that is what we know of as the writings of the Arizal. Now we're still in the stage of understanding the history of it. In the 17th century, there were 4 different tzaddikim who come along looking at the writings of the Arizal, and they interpret the writings of the Arizal or the Kabbalah of the Arizal in their own way. Now, we know that when a person looks at the Torah HaKadosha, there's a concept of Pardes HaTorah. Pardes, Pei, Reish, Daled, Samech, stands for 4 things. Pshat, the simple understanding. Remez, the hints, gematriot, and things like that. Drash, the interpretation of those ideas. And Sod, and the secrets of those ideas. Now, usually the Zohar HaKadosh and the Arizal are the Samech of Pardes. They represent the Sod of the Torah. But when we look at the teachings of the Arizal and the teachings of the Zohar, we can also see 4 different paths of understanding those teachings, which is the Pardes of Sod. When you look at Sodos HaTorah, when you look at the secrets of Torah, there are 4 different ways of understanding it. And these 4 different ways of understanding the writings of the Arizal take place through 4 different tzaddikim who all lived around the same time or very close to each other in the 17th century. The Pshat of the Arizal was Rav Shalom Sharabi. Rav Shalom Sharabi, or the Rashash, who came from the Sephardi world of Kabbalah, eventually becoming the Rosh Hashiva of Yeshivat Beit El in the old city of Yerushalayim. The Rashash and the Sephardi Mikubalim spend all of their energy and all of their time trying to understand the pshat of what the Arizal meant. What he meant when he spoke about the different worlds and the different sfirot and the different partsufim, all of the things we're going to talk about in a few moments. The remez of the Arizal was the Vilna Gaon, or the Gra. Now the Gra, even though most of us know him as a Litvak or somebody who spent most of his time learning learning Niglos HaTorah, the Vilna Gaon is one of the biggest mikubalim that the Jewish people have ever had. The Vilna Gaon wrote a lot more on Kabbalah than he did on Gemara or Halacha. The Vilna Gaon wrote a Perush on Safar Ditzniusa, which is a chelek of the Zohar. He wrote a Perush on Sefer HaYetzira. He wrote a Perush on Tikkun Zohar. He wrote a Kabbalistic Perush on the Torah called Aderet Eliyahu. And he wrote a Perush on a different part of the Zohar HaKadosh called Hechalot HaZohar. The Vilna Gaon represents the remez, the hints of the Torah, of Sodas HaTorah. Drash, or the drush of what Kabbalah was, who was the third tzaddik who lived in the 17th century, was Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the Ramchal. When a person looks at the writings of the Ramchal, it's all an interpretation of the Arizal in a way that is understandable to us. And the Sod of the Sod, the deepest understanding of the Sod, was the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, the holy Baal Shem Tov. Now, thankfully, each and every one of these tzaddikim had Talmidim. The Rashash had Talmidim who was Rav Chaim de la Rosa, the Torah's Chacham, and the Shemen Sasson, and the Shemen Zayit Zach. The Vilna Gaon had Talmidim who were Rav Chaim Volozhiner, who wrote Nefesh HaChaim, and Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, and the Leshem Shabova Achloma. And the Ramchal had Talmidim Rav Moshe David Va'ali and Rav Yekuti El Gordon. And the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh had all of his Talmidim, the Maggid of Mezrich and the Baal HaTanya, and the Noam Elimelech and Rabbi Nachman. And so what we can see is that really most of the teachings that we have nowadays, the teachings of the Rashash and the Vilna Gaon and the Ramchal and the Baal Shem Tov and all of their students are commentaries on the Kabbalah. And what they allowed us to do was to take the writings of the Arizal so that they can become understandable to us in our own way. That's the basic history in a very short way of how Kabbalah started by Moshe Rabbeinu to Rabbi Akiva, to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, to the Arizal, and all of the different, and the Ramak, and the Arizal, and all of the different tzaddikim, the Rashash, and the Vilna Gaon, and the Ramchal, and the Baal Shem Tov and his students. And now I want to talk about a little bit what Kabbalah actually means. What were they trying to teach to us? Now, there are really, generally speaking, three ways that a person can approach the teachings of Kabbalah. One of them is going to be kavanot ha-tefillah, the intentions of davening, what a person is supposed to think about when they're davening, where our neshama is going. Another way is to understand how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, how the infinite can become finite without losing its infinity, or how the unlimited HaKadosh Baruch Hu could create a world of limitation but still remain infinite. And the third way is going to be what it means for us personally. So let's start with understanding how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. What Kabbalah tries to teach us is that even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite, is Ein Sof, and we can never truly understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, or why HaKadosh Baruch Hu does certain things, or how HaKadosh Baruch Hu does certain things, what Hashem wants from us, Kavyachol, is to try and understand what we are able to understand. And what our holy books teach us is that in the process of creating the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed to create certain vessels, certain ways or directions through which he could shine his light. Now, before we go any further, it's very, very important to understand that anything that a person understands in Kabbalah, any words like light, or orot, or kelim, or svirot, or partsufim, or olamot, or neshamot, all of these are words that we use to describe something that is indescribable. We are not chas v'shalom describing exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. Our language can never ever grasp what Hashem is. Our minds can't grasp what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite ve'ein sof, b'chol minei ein sof, in every possible way of infinity. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals to us that there are ways that Hashem reveals himself in the world. First and foremost, what we know of is the Eser Svirot, the 10 Svirot. Now, what the Svirot are vessels through which HaKadosh Baruch Hu shines his light. They are not HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is unified. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always one and indivisible. Echad Yachid U'Miyuchad. There's never, ever a time where a person can chas v'shalom think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Sfiros are one and the same. That's Avodah Zarah, because that would be claiming that Hashem is more than one. The ikar of Kabbalah is that Hashem is miyuchad, is singular, is one, in a way that we can never even understand. But in order to reveal himself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes his light, kavyachol, and shines it through different vessels. Just like I could turn on the faucet of water, and that water is going to be the same no matter what. But if I have 10 different cups that are 10 different colors, when that water enters into the cup, it's going to look like it's a different color. So that even though the water remains the same, even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu remains unified and singular and Yachid, Echad Yachid U'Miyuchad, and no distinction and no division, Chas v'Shalom, nevertheless, from our perception, the way we see it, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing himself in different ways. Now these Eser Svirot, these 10 ways that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself, are referred to as Keter, which is, in terms of our bodies and understanding what it means, Keter is the skull, Keter is the cranium, and it represents Ratzon, or desire. Chochmah, which is the right brain, when we have a very sharp lightning bolt grasp of an idea, a sudden burst of inspiration that doesn't last very long, that's the right brain, that's Chochmah. Bina is the left brain, which is Mevin Davar Mitoch Davar, which is more of a natural understanding of things. It's not some sharp lightning bolt, but it's spending time thinking about it. Then in parentheses, there's a concept of das, of knowledge, which transforms the mind into the body. And then what we have is the 7 lower sfirot, which correspond to the 7 days of the week and 7 different parts of our body. The right arm is chesed, loving kindness, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire to move forward, or a person's desire to move forward. Gevurah, which is the left arm, which is constriction and pachad yitzchak and setting limitations. The body itself is tiferet, the beauty of Yaakov Avinu, which takes the opposites of chesed and gevurah and unifies them together to create a picture that is greater than the sum total of its parts. And then the right leg is netzach, the ability to move forward, to be victorious. The left leg is hod, grandeur or modesty and gratitude. And then yesod is the lower part of our body, where we take all of the information and we express it outwards. And then there's Malchus, which is how we experience this world. All of those 10 sfirot are the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu expresses his light into the world. Like we say in Tefillah, based on the pasuk, L'cha Hashem HaGedula, which is Chesed, HaGevura, the HaTiferes, the HaNetzach, the HaHod, Ki Kol Bashamayim. Ki Kol is the midah of Yesod, which contains everything. Uba'aretz is the midah of Malchus. In addition to describing the Eser Svirot, there's also the awareness that Kabbalah teaches us, which is that the world that we live in is not all that exists, but rather what we experience down here, what we see down here in the day-to-day of experience and history, from the beginning of Adam HaRishon to the coming of Mashiach Be'ezrat Hashem, all takes place within the physical universe of Olam HaAsiyah. To the naked eye, this is all that we see. But what the Kabbalah comes to teach us is that don't chas v'shalom think for a second that all that there exists is what we see, but rather there are worlds upon worlds, and that the more a person rectifies themselves and purifies themselves, the higher and higher we can climb to the higher worlds. Kabbalah generally describes 4 different worlds. The world of Atzilus, which is very close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kavyachol, where it's all good, everything is good, there's no existence of evil or darkness or concealment or suffering or sadness or death. Then there's the world of Beriah, of the world of creation, where there is a lot of good and the possibility of a little bit of bad. Then underneath that is the world of Yetzirah, where it's equal, good and bad are equal. And then it's the world of Asiyah, where we live, where the bad far outweighs the good. So the Kabbalah teaches us that instead of looking at the world that we live in and feeling that it's all that exists, we have the power to understand that what we experience is simply the tip of the iceberg. And that if a person looks deeper, if a person looks underneath to see how much larger things are, there's so much room to grow and to develop oneself. Another element of the teachings of Kabbalah is that just like the world that we live in is not all that there is, but there's inner truth that a person can uncover and move into with Emunah, the same is true with ourselves. That we usually think that we have a neshama, that we have a soul. What the Kabbalah teaches us is that really our soul has 5 different layers. And each of those different layers are going to represent a different level of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll start from the lowest level, which is the nefesh. The nefesh is part of the body. It's the physical experience of this world. Then there's the ruach, which is our emotions, our feelings, our heart. Then there is the neshama, which is our mind or our thoughts. Then above the nefesh, ruach, and neshama, there is the concept of 2 higher parts of ourselves that we don't have too much access to, which are referred to as the chaya and the yechida. So just as the worlds that the Kabbalah teaches us about are multiple, so too when it comes to the soul is multiple. There's various levels of the soul. And as I grow in Torah and mitzvot and tahara and kedusha and emunah and bitachon, I move from the lower parts of myself to the higher part of myself, ultimately trying to become the best that I can be. Another very important teaching that the Kabbalah brings down is how HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates the world. Because for the Kabbalah, what is absolutely true is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Ein Sof ve'Ein Tachlis. Hashem is completely unlimited. Hashem is without measure. The infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is so powerful that it's not possible for anything else to exist. Because when something is so aware of where it comes from, when something is so aware of its source, it stops feeling like it's something that exists. So in order for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create the world in a way that there can be bechira, where we can choose between good and evil, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was mitzamtzem himself. The concept of tzimtzum, which the Mikubalim spoke about before the Arizal, but the Arizal really made an important idea, is the concept that in order to give birth to the world, Kavyachol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to remove a certain part of his light. Because when HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light is infinite and everywhere, it's impossible for anything but HaKadosh Baruch Hu to exist. But when God, so to speak, removes his light and contracts his light, he creates an empty space where existence can begin to take shape. That empty space is referred to as the Halal HaPanui. Now this concept of Simtsum, of Hashem's contraction, becomes a very, very, very important concept. Because there are two ways that that idea can be understood. Some people like to claim that the Vilna Gaon said that when the Arizal talks about Tzimtzum, it really means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed his light, Kavyachol. That there's an empty space where the world exists and Hashem's light is not there, and it's our job to draw that light back down. That's the opinion that Tzimtzum is kipshuto. That when the Arizal and the Zohar say that Hashem removed his light, it means that he mamish removed his light, and it's our job to bring it back down. But the Baal Shem Tov and his Talmidim, and the Rashash as well, and the Ramchal as well, and I think the Vilna Gaon as well, I don't think there's any machlokas, they say that no, chas v'shalom, that Tzimtzum is not kipshuto. Hashem didn't remove himself from the world. Nothing is outside of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like the Zohar HaKadosh teaches us, Leis asar panui minei. There is no place that is the void of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is soivev kol almin. He surrounds all of the worlds. Umimale kol almin. And he fills all of the worlds. So that everything is saturated and filled with the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like it was before creation, it's the same way it was after creation. So then how does Hashem create the world? So Zak, the Baal Shem Tov and his students, that what the Tzimtzum means is not that Hashem chas v'shalom removed himself, but Hashem concealed himself. Hashem hid himself. And by hiding himself, by hiding his light, he allows for the creation of something that looks like it's opposite from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the darkness of our world. But if HaKadosh Baruch Hu only hid himself, then our job is not necessarily to draw down HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light into our world, but rather our job is to reveal the light of Hashem that is already here. It's a very big difference. One opinion that says Hashem really removed his light, so to speak, feels that the world is without Hashem, but by Torah and mitzvos we bring Hashem into the world. The other opinion, which says that Hashem never truly removes himself, chas v'shalom, would say that it's not our job to draw Hashem into the world, it's our job to reveal that Hashem is already here, wherever I am. No matter how dark, no matter how difficult, no matter how broken, no matter how scared or how anxious or how sad we might feel in our personal lives, in our avodat Hashem, in our community lives, when we look at the world, our job is to realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is already there. That in everything that we do, in every experience that we have, in every taste of food that we have, we are connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Another aspect of the Kabbalah, and this is, I believe, one of the most important ideas, and it's very much connected to the Arizal, or connected to the Arizal's concept of tzimtzum, is the idea of shvirat hakelim, the shattering of the vessels. For Kabbalah to Arizal, there are two elements which are present everywhere in our lives, in the world, in all of the worlds. And those concepts are referred to as oros and kalim, lights and vessels. The light is what comes down from above to below, from Hashem down into the world. And the vessels are what receive that light and work with that light. We are the vessels. The world is the vessel. If it was only orot, if it was only the lights of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there would be no measurement, there would be no limitation, there would be no room for avodat Hashem or bechira. If there was only vessels, then there would be no room for serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because all it would be is vessels. So what there needs to be is a relationship between the light that comes from above down below and the vessels that we create down here in order to receive that light from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be makablim. Parenthetically, on the side, the lights that come down are from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's referred to as Kudsha Barichu, that the holiness of God, may His name be blessed. And us, in our vessels and our world, is referred to as the Shechina, as the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the neshama of the Bnei Yisrael that are found in this world. Which is why every time a person does a mitzvah, or prepares to eat and make a bracha, or learn a word of Torah, what many people say is l'shem yichud kudsha barichu v'shchinte. That what we are doing right now is for the sake of the unity between kudsha barichu and the Shechina, between the lights and the vessels, between Hashem and Bnei Yisrael, between the infinite and the finite, between the unlimited and the limited, between light and darkness. Our job in this world is to show that everything is unified, that even though it looks like Hashem is not present, even though it looks like we live in a world of pirud and separation, our job is to receive that light that comes from above by learning Torah, by doing mitzvos, by thinking, by having kavanah, by being kind, by having shalom bayis, by working and making a kiddush Hashem. What we are doing is we are showing that this world that appears to be separate is in truth part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that ultimately all there is yichud, is unity. And that leads me to kind of the last part of what I would like to teach, which is what the Kabbalah is trying to teach us. The Kabbalah is trying to teach us one thing, and that is yichud. That even though when we look at the world, it appears to be broken, dark, shattered, torn apart, a million little pieces, suffering, and all of the different feelings that we have. Bipnimius, if we learn how to look deeper, if we learn how to tear open the world and look inside, which is what Pnimius HaTorah means, then we will understand that everything is part of the process that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted. The ultimate goal of Pnimius HaTorah and Kabbalah is to lead to more emunah and more bitachon, more faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and more trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Which means that even though the world appears to be torn apart and broken, nevertheless, we believe deeply within our hearts that it's all part of the Yichud Hashem, and that eventually, with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, with the end of creation, what Hashem will reveal to us is that all of that darkness, and all of that difficulty, and all of that brokenness that you experienced was all part of a greater picture. That's what Kabbalah is coming to teach us not to chas v'shalom think that there is duality in the world, that there's separation in the world, that there's darkness in the world, but rather even darkness is part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when we have that emunah, and when we're able to gaze deeply into the world, with this understanding that there is more going on than that which meets the eye, that what I see is not all that there is, that the measurements and the constriction that I find in my life is not all that exists, then we give birth in our own hearts to more emuna and to more kedusha. Now, it's very important to say that what we discussed tonight is mamish, not even aleph, not even aleph. The world of Kabbalah is infinite. The world of the Torah HaKadosha is infinite. The Kabbalah teaches us how to understand Adam Arishon and Chava in Gan Eden. It teaches us how to understand Cain and Hevel. It teaches us how to understand Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, Yosef, all of the Shvatim. It teaches us how to understand Gullus. It teaches us how to understand Churban. And Be'ezras Hashem, it also teaches us how to understand Geula. And if there's interest and if there's a feeling that we want more, then Be'ezras Hashem will be able to share more about what the inner teachings of the Kabbalah have to teach us. Because each and every tzaddik, each and every mechaber has their own understanding of what these ideas mean. But ultimately, what it means on the basic level is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one, and that even though we see darkness, it's really light. Even though we feel like we're struggling, what we're doing is we're preparing ourselves to reveal the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has always been here, and that by struggling, we will reveal HaKadosh Baruch Hu in an even deeper way. So that's my humble introduction. An introduction to an introduction of what the Arizal and what our tzaddikim are coming to teach us. The most important thing to understand is that at the end of the day, Kabbalah understands at the heart of what the Arizal is saying, there's a realization that we know nothing. That the greatest thing that a Jewish person can do at the end of the day is to have emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. An emunah that is lamala mitam v'das. A faith that is above rational wisdom and rational knowledge. Because when we come to the ceiling of what we understand, we come to realize that that ceiling is really the floor of the next level. And that's infinite. And the more we grow, the more we realize we have to grow. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we should be zoichet to spend more time learning together, sharing ideas together. And what I want to do now is I want to allow for, some questions and to see if there's anything that I can answer.
Thank you so much, Joey. It was amazing, your introduction. And we know it's only, like you said, an aleph of all these ideas. So we have a few questions that people are asking in private chats and also in the chat of the Zoom meeting. So the first question that came in, it's somebody that's asking, what is your advice or your opinion on studying Kabbalah today and our generation?
Our tzaddikim tell us it used to be that Kabbalah was reserved for the people who knew Shas and Poskim, and for the people who knew Kol HaTorah Kula, and spent all of their time going back and forth. And anybody else wasn't meant to learn these ideas because of the mistakes that they can make. The Zohar HaKadosh tells us that from the Shnas Taf Reish, which roughly translates into 1840 on the secular calendar, was a time period where the secrets began to be revealed, which means a number of things. Which means on a certain level, we can't survive without these ideas. The Zidichava Rebbe used to say, he said, people claim that you can't study Kabbalah until you're Tahor and Kadosh. And he said, but my question is, how in the world can you be Tahor and Kadosh without studying Kabbalah? What he wanted was for children to be reading the Zohar. The Leshem Shuva V'Chaloma and the Vilna Gaon felt that the closer and closer we come to the times of Mashiach, the more and more these teachings will be revealed. The Baal Shem Tov and his students felt that we're so sick nowadays. We're so sick that we have to use the strongest medicine possible. All of these different answers point to one specific thing, that in our generation, we have reshus, we have permission to study these ideas. Because we don't know anything anyway. And at best, we can hope to connect to a little bit of Emunah and a little bit of Bitachon. So what used to be very concealed, most tzaddikim now say that it's time for anybody to grab hold of anything that they can. Rav Kook, Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook, one of the biggest mikubalim that the Jewish people ever had, he said that there will come a time towards the end of days where you won't be able to explain even the Aleph Beis of Judaism without using Kabbalah. And I think that that's the time period that we're in. So I think it's very important for people to study it and to push forward and to struggle and to study more.
Okay. There's another very interesting question that I personally have been asked so many times, and somebody is bringing it up. He wrote it in the questions. Is that we used to know that to learn Kabbalah you have to be 40 years old, or women should not learn Kabbalah. So what's your approach to all these statements that to learn Kabbalah you have to be prepared with certain knowledge, or even women do not learn Kabbalah?
It's a good question. First and foremost, the makor that says that people need to be 40 and older is the Shach. And part of that was because of the reaction to what happened after the Arizal, before the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, which was Shabtai Tzvi Yamach Shemo and his Chavra, who misunderstood the teachings of the Kabbalah, used it for their own selfish purposes, and sent Klal Yisrael into a very deep and dark hole. And after we grew out of that, and we came to the other side, the tzaddikim were very, very worried that people would misunderstand things again. So they made halachot and they made rules that you can't study this until you know everything and until you're mature enough to understand it. So nowadays, again, I think what we answered earlier, whether we're looking at it from the perspective of the Baal Shem Tov or the Vilna Gaon or of Kook or all of the tzaddikim, nowadays we understand that Hashem is one. We understand what Torah and mitzvot are. And even if we don't understand, we're so sick that we need this medicine. When a person is very healthy, so there's room to say, okay, don't take this medicine because it could hurt you. Take this medicine because it could work for you. But when Klal Yisrael are already on their deathbed, when so many of the Jewish people have lost the feeling of what Kedusha is, have lost an idea of what holiness is, have lost all excitement over Torah and Tefillah and Maisa HaMitzvos, at a certain point we need to inject ourselves with the strongest medicine possible. When it comes to women studying Kabbalah, I don't have an answer, but what I do know is what the tzaddikim taught and what the Lubavitcher Rebbe used to teach is that women should certainly be learning Chasidus, and women should be learning Machshava. And what Machshava and Chasidus are really the same teachings of Kabbalah, but in a different way. So I don't have an answer that I'm comfortable giving because I don't know. But my feeling would be that especially when it comes to understanding these ideas in a real way, on a personal way, that women are equal in it, that women should be studying it as well.
Okay. Somebody's asking that you listed a number of big personalities in all these teachings, but what about Abraham Abulafia?
Rav Avram Abulafia was from the 13th century, so he was before the Arizal. Before the Arizal. The Arizal, however, quotes Rav Avram Abulafia in a number of places, and the tzaddikim feel that Rav Avram Abulafia was a tzaddik and a kadosh and a tahor, even though there were certain tzaddikim in the generation of Rav Avram Abulafia who had a major hisnagdus and a machlokas with him, like the Rashba and different people. And Rav Avram Abulafia's story and his biography is somewhat strange and remarkable. Nevertheless, there has been a resurgence and a renewed interest in the meditative techniques that Rav Avram Abulafia speaks about. And there are major tzaddikim in Yerushalayim nowadays who are teaching those writings. We now have the Svarim. I think you can find Rav Avram Avalafia Svarim on apps nowadays. These are books that tzaddikim would have given their lives for. But the techniques of Rav Avram Avalafia, which are thinking about different letters and connecting different letters and having different kavanot, it demands a real experience with meditation and knowing how to meditate. And if a person is capable of doing such a thing, then I think that the tzaddikim say that a person should do such a thing. A tzaddik that I feel very, very, very much connected to, who I consider my Rebbe, is Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern, Rav Yitzchak Meyer Morgenstern Shlita, who lives in Yerushalayim. In last week's email that his base medrash sent out, he tells the story that in London there was a Baal Tshuva who wasn't even ready for tshuva, someone who was mamish a choite umachta, somebody who had no shaychus to kedusha, and that he found the book of Rav Avram Abulafia and he started reading it, and this person was claiming that he was experiencing major light in his life, major ha'aros. And Rav Yitzchak said that we see from here that there's even the koyach of Rav Avram Avulafia's writings are that they can even enlighten a soul that has no connection. So the writings of Rav Avram Abulafia are kodesh hakadashim, really kodesh hakadashim. I don't study them because I don't know how to meditate properly, and I struggle with it. But I have them, and they're kodesh hakadashim.
Okay. There's somebody that I want him to ask the question live. His name is Isaac Seaton. So I don't know if he wants to turn on his camera. Isaac, ¿estás ahí?
Aquí estamos. Here
He
we
has
are.
a very good question.
Rob. Good. How about the day that the one person borns? In the Kabbalah speak about a lot of the neshama of the tzaddikim when one borns in his date.
Isaac, can you repeat the question? When he burns in his what?
In the date of one of the pass away of the one tzaddik.
Yeah.
And one gets like a influence of the tzaddik.
The Ibor Neshama.
Yeah.
Right, being impregnated with the soul of the tzaddik. This is something that was around before the Arizal, but the Arizal spoke about it a lot. What it means on a certain level for at least me, meaning as someone who's not a tzaddik, as somebody who's not a person who has hasagos. What it means is that when you're learning a sefer of a tzaddik, especially on the art side of that tzaddik, if you study it properly in lishma, your neshama becomes inflamed. Your neshama begins to be davek to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It begins to believe deeply in HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way that you didn't believe before. And that siyua, that chizuk, that strength comes from connecting to that neshama of the tzaddik. It's not like a ghost. It's not like chas v'shalom, some magic, where that neshama of the tzaddik arrives in front of you. By the tzaddikim, that's possible. But for us, what it means is that we believe that the words that we're studying and the teachings that are given over came from a living person. And that living person spent their entire lives trying to be davek to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chazal already tell us this. The Gemara says that when a person is learning a sefer, that it should be ki'ilu bal hashmua oimed kenegdo, that it should be as if the person who taught this teaching is standing in front of you. Or in the Yerushalmi, it says that when I learn the words of a certain tzaddik, svasav dovrot bekever, that tzaddik's lips begin murmuring in the grave. So what it means to have an ibor neshama is to be inspired, is to have more enthusiasm to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu through the words of a tzaddik, through the words that are in that writing. And when it comes to a yard site, there's an extra koyach. But our tzaddikim already tell us that if you want to be considered the Talmud of a tzaddik, all you have to do is learn their books. because they're also buried in their books. Rabbi Nachman is buried in his book, just like he's buried in Uman.
Wow. And what about when there is a yahrzeit of one tzaddik to study in that day and like have a candle?
Yeah. The yahrzeit of a tzaddik is a time where the neshama is me'ir. Because by tzaddikim, their misa, Gemara tells us already at the end of Maseches Brachos that tzaddikim eim lehem menucha ba'ilam hazeh ve'eim lehem menucha ba'ilam haba. They don't have rest in this world and they don't have rest in the next world. Why? Because hayilchem mechayil el chayil. They go from one level to another. They're always climbing the ladder of spiritual growth. So that when it comes time for the tzaddik's death to be remembered, what it's like is that the neshama is now going even higher. And when that neshama goes higher, there's also some way, somehow, it would take much longer than the time we have now to try and explain how that light or that ha'ara of that tzaddik comes down into this world as well. Rabbi Nachman is a very important teaching about this, about how when a tzaddik dies, it gives the Talmidim the ability to understand his words in an even deeper way. So lighting a candle and being mazkir and making a l'chaim, or saying Kaddish for that tzaddik, is a way of being mitkasher to that tzaddik. Mishnayos are osiot neshama, Rav Yosef Cairo tells us. So when we learn the Mishnayot, Eloi Nishmat somebody, what we're doing is we're being makasher to the neshama.
Amazing, Rab. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Rav Joey, we have one more question. Somebody is asking that learning Kabbalah, Zohar, without understanding, does it have an impact?
Mamash, bevadai. Specifically the Zohar. The Arizal points it out, the Balatanya points it out in his Shulchan Aruch Harav. Even the Gra points it out that when you do it with a certain tune, that the words of the Zohar specifically are Mesugal l'taharat neshama. That without understanding it, even if you daven them, if you read them straight and you begin to be mitavek to the code, to the holiness of those words, it has a very, very big hashpah on the neshama. That's not true when learning Gemara necessarily. Gemara is about understanding. Halacha is about understanding. But when the Zohar HaKadosh is speaking, the goal is to come to a place of an emunah. And emunah means that we really don't know. So when a person reads those words without understanding, like a tinok, like a child, it's very misagul for the tahara of the neshama. That's what the tzaddikim say. Very much.
I thought that it was going to be the last question, but somebody is begging to ask the next question. So I bring him up live, that he should ask you the question live. So he's in the stream.
Thank you, Moshe. Thank you, Rav. It's good to see you again.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. It's very interesting how you put it on words. All the history of Kabbalah and how can we approach. So the question is, what does Kabbalah say about our times in relation to our Avodat Hashem? In relation how our Avodat Hashem should be?
Specifically in our time?
Yes.
Meaning our generation.
In our generation.
The Kabbalah understands that as the world continues to move forward, the later and later it gets in history, the smaller and smaller our minds are going to become. The less and less we'll be able to grasp, the less and less we'll be able to understand. But because of the darkness and because of the confusion and because of the concealment, we have the ability of grabbing hold of even the slightest point of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that point is worth more than what previous generations have done. Rav Chaim Vital asks his Rebbe this question. He said to the Arizal, how is it possible that my generation should be Zocha to bring Mashiach if the previous generations weren't Zocha to bring Mashiach? And the Arizal's answer was because they had big hearts and they were able to do a lot. But we who are dead and unconscious, even the smallest step that we take is worthy and beautiful in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I think that very pashat, to do more mitzvos, one nekuda of emunah, one word of davening, one positive thought, finding Nikudos Tovos. Any small piece that a person can do is worth more than we can ever imagine.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much.
Joey, we
Yeah.
can have one more question.
Sure, lama lo.
So he's on live. Abraham, ¿quieres preguntar en vivo? Nada más prende tu micrófono y tu cámara. Ahí está. There he is.
Hi, Avram.
How are you, Rob? Thank you very
Good,
much.
Baruch Hashem.
Beautiful. Thank you. I want to ask you what you recommend for starting studying. If it's possible to Etz Chaim and or Chot, it's Otzrot Chaim, and it's a good. Or before we have to have an introduction. Before what books do you recommend?
It depends if you have a teacher. What I would recommend, that I don't know what's translated into different.
Hebrew, okay.
But if English is okay, what I think the best introductory book is a book called Inner Space.
I know.
Written by Avram Sutton,
Kaplan.
which is a series of shirim from Rav Aryeh Kaplan. If a person studies that properly and in depth, looking at the Makorot in the back, I think then a person is ready to study Otzrot Chaim with the Matok Midvash, with Rav Daniel Frisch's Perush.
The Perush of Matok Midvash.
That's what I would say.
With you have to study with Chabrute, not alone.
There are Makorot that say that the Sefer can become your Chavrusa. If you have a Chavrusa, it's bevadai better.
Right.
But if you don't, b'makom she'ein ish, become the ish.
Okay.
There are a number of also very important Hakdama Svarim. One of them is Sefer Hakdamot Sha'arim from the Leshem Shavov Achlama, the picture of the tzaddik that we have behind me on top. That's a very valuable Sefer. And for those who are more makushar to the derech of Sephard, the Ben Ish Chai wrote a Sefer called Da'as V'Tvunot, which is also an incredible Hakdama Sefer.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's what
Thank
I
you.
would say.
Beautiful. Love to see you again.
Yasher koach, Bezrat Hashem.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Joey.
It's my pleasure.
It was amazing class. Very nice introduction. And somebody's asking, when is going to be the base class? You spoke about Aleph, so he wants to know when is going to be base class.
Whenever you want me back, I'm here. I love teaching with your chevra.
Thank you so much, and Mazel Tov for your baby.
Thank you.
And hopefully seeing you again very soon.
Amen. Toda rabba.
Thank you so much, Joey. Gracias a todos por conectarse. Saludos y nos vemos de regreso. Un calendario lleno para el mes de Elul. Manténganse informados. Gracias.